Manager at Frontline Selling. We would like to welcome you to the IBM webinar, Prospecting Optimization, Mind the Gap. Today we'll explore that critical and often unrecognized gap between marketing and sales, prospecting optimization. I'm excited to introduce our presenter, Frontline Selling Vice President and Sales Director, Tom Ryder. Tom is instrumental in coaching thousands of sales executives and becoming better at getting more first appointments. And here at Frontline Selling, we help our clients get more first appointments with people who are genuinely interested in talking to them so they can sell more. This webinar is being recorded today and will be made available to IBM Partner World for replay. If you have questions for Tom, please chat them into your webinar panel on the right side of your screen at any time during the session, and we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end. So thanks for joining today. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Tom, and we can get started.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to the IBM partner community. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us this afternoon. Today we're going to talk about prospecting optimization, and hopefully what I'll be able to do over the course of the next 30, 45 minutes or so is really get you all thinking a little bit differently about the process behind the activity of prospecting, with the intention, of course, as Brett had mentioned, with the intention to get the attention of your targeted prospect audience and ultimately engage in more meaningful, higher quality first interactions, first conversations, so that you're able to uncover more sales opportunities. And the caveat is, of course, we want to create more opportunities, and we want to speak with more prospects who are genuinely interested in speaking with us, to learn more about our solutions, to learn more about the value that we can bring to their organization, and like I said, ultimately to engage and identify more selling opportunities. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about optimizing your prospecting activity. And we talk about optimizing your prospecting activity, we want to think about what are the best ways in which to ultimately take the opportunity, take the activity in which we are encountering, right, and optimize that activity on a daily basis. So when we look at the actual definition of prospecting optimization, we define this as the act or the process and the methodology for making prospecting as fully perfect, functional, and effective as possible. So through the course of today's discussion, what I'm going to ask you to do is really start thinking at and really start looking at how you go about your daily activity of prospecting, and start analyzing, do you have a process? Each individual in your individual activities, and of course your teams. So is there a defined process behind what to say and how to say it, when to say it, how often to say it, exactly what to say, right? Is there a highly effective, and how effective, I should say, is the process that you are currently engaged in? And ultimately the question is can you engage in more meaningful business conversations? Would you like to increase the number of meaningful first business conversations that you're having more than you're having today? And what are the ways that you and your team, of course, can optimize your prospecting efforts? So when we look at where this activity fits, prospecting optimization, the space where this fits, we have noticed that there is a significant gap between marketing and sales. And while that might not come as a surprise to most people, as we all have understand through the course of our careers, that there often is a gap, whether it be in communication or in expectations between marketing and sales. We really have found that prospecting optimization kind of fits very, simply between these two areas. And so when we look at defining each individual, right, process, we look at marketing process on the front end, right, understanding what is it that goes into our marketing efforts, right? Well, obviously quite a bit goes into our marketing efforts, right? There's marketing automation platforms, a lot of obviously time, money, and effort are spent, and resources are spent in the marketing process, starting with marketing automation platforms, okay? Ways to uncover more opportunities, more quote-unquote leads. We, of course, are leveraging social media, websites and blogs, emails, right, that are going out strategically to target prospects, okay? And the ultimate goal through your marketing process is to produce qualified leads that are then passed to sales. Okay? So all of these, and of course there may be additional efforts that you're putting forward towards your marketing process, pardon me, are all with the intention to create leads. Okay. In addition, we also find that most people are spending exorbitant amount of time and money investing and looking for quote unquote the perfect list. Right. So there's the inclination that if we have good leads, if we have qualified leads, if we have lists of qualified leads, then the solutions should seem pretty simple, that we would be able to engage in finding more opportunities. Okay? Now, on the other side of the equation, there's the sales process. Okay? And a lot of time, money, effort, and resources are put towards defining a sales process. Of course, starting with the first conversation. So, like I said, the leads that we're looking to create and that marketing are creating are intending to result in first conversations. Of course, from that first conversation, you've got your sales presentations, okay? And then you find yourself through those sales presentations in the proposal stage, and then from the proposal stage, you find yourself in the negotiation and closing stage of opportunities. And this ultimately is what defines the sales process. Identify an opportunity, work that opportunity through the sales life cycle, and then bring that to closure for new business. However, what we've found is that, and this is very common amongst all of our clients, and just in the general marketplace, that we find that people, right, organizations just aren't getting enough, aren't having enough of those first meaningful business conversations. Okay, so there's a big gap, right, in the number of leads that are being generated and the number of first conversations that are being converted from those leads that are being generated. Because as we know, if you don't have that first conversation, then certainly you can't have a sales presentation proposal and close that business. So what we're finding and what we're hearing in the marketplace quite often is that there's a significant lag between converting those leads into qualified sales opportunities, which result from first meaningful business conversations. And so what we're looking at, and what we've really honed in here at Frontline Selling, is how do we take and help fill that gap? How do we increase the conversions of the leads and the efforts from marketing and convert those into actual selling opportunities so that you are engaging more, right, more often. You are engaging with a higher qualified audience. And as a result of those higher qualified conversations, right, you are identifying more higher quality opportunities. So not only is the velocity or the quantity of opportunities increasing, what we're finding is the revenue stream coming from those opportunities is exponentially much more higher, because not only are we creating more opportunities, but we're creating higher quality, higher value opportunities. Okay, so what does this mean, of course, for you? If you're not converting those opportunities, if you're not converting those leads, I should say, into first conversations, and as a result of those first conversations opportunities, then certainly that means that there's a lot of missed opportunity. Okay, so again, what I'm going to ask you all to do today is start looking at and start analyzing and start critiquing, if you will, your own process and conversions of all the marketing efforts that are taking place and understanding and looking at what are the actual conversions, right? Because again, we find most oftentimes people might not pay attention to what the actual conversion of marketing leads to first opportunities, first sales qualified opportunities as a result of a first meaningful conversation. Okay, so that's the area that we're looking to focus in on. Okay, what we do here at Frontline Selling is when we started the business 12 years ago, we looked at this area that was, significantly depleting the opportunities, and there was certainly a need in the marketplace for higher quality, right, service to provide higher quality, more consistently first opportunities, first conversations. Okay, so when we started this at Frontline Selling, what we did is we looked at, well, what are the processes? Why do these, why do we not necessarily meet the goals that, we intend on meeting in terms of converting those marketing leads into opportunities for conversations? Well, what we realized is that it comes down to two very simple areas. Number one, how are you creating those opportunities in the first place? Okay, and what we realized after working with, at this point, after 12 years, tens of thousands of sales professionals, is that the sales professionals, yourselves included, have the acumen, you have the talent, you've got the incentive in place to be successful. But what's consistently lacking is just a very simple common sense approach to tell people so that you know exactly what to say, exactly how to say it, exactly who to say it to when you're saying it, okay? How many times to say it, how often to say it, and then the focus, of course, to make that behavior a day in and day out ritual, a discipline behind your prospecting activity, okay? So what I'd like you to do for the next, say a couple seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, is take a look at these three words, golf, baseball, and tennis, and think about what those three words have in common. Okay, golf, baseball, and tennis. Well, of course, they're all sports. Okay, they're all sports that involve, a ball. Okay, but when we look at these three words, I should say, golf, baseball, and tennis, what I look at and what I see is, well, here are three sports that quite likely most people, including the group on the phone today, have engaged in or have played at one point in time in their lives. And within those three sports, as we've all played them, we've all experienced what we'll refer to as that occasional genius, meaning if you've ever gone golfing, right, you've at least on one hole at one point in time, you probably parred or birdied a hole, meaning you stepped up to the tee box, hit a perfect shot off the tee, okay? Your fairway shot was perfect. It landed on the green, and you two-putt for a par, okay? And then baseball, okay, if you've played baseball growing up, in youth baseball or high school and college, okay, you've had that perfect swing, and you hit the ball perfectly, okay? And in tennis, right, same thing, perfect swing, and you hit the sweet spot right, right on the sweet spot of the racket, and, it's exactly the way it should be. Now, the problem is it doesn't happen every single time, and that's, of course, what separates the professional athletes from the rest of us in the world, right, is that professional athlete can do it more consistently, okay, than, of course, than we can, right? But if we could, like a professional does, and if we could look at and we know exactly why certain things work and why they don't, meaning why, if we don't hit a perfect tee shot, did we not hit that shot perfectly that time, and what we would need to do the next tee shot in order to correct that and hit that next tee shot perfectly, okay? What if we could look at and know exactly what we did incorrectly so that we know how to fix that going forward, so that most oftentimes or more consistently it is perfect, okay? This is the same approach that we here at Frontline Selling take to our prospecting activity. This is what defines prospecting optimization. Okay? The activity that we partake in, okay, and we show our clients how to partake and show our clients the way we go about our process, right? Then all of a sudden, if we know what to say and we know how to say it, right, and we start knowing what the responses are going to be, our activity starts becoming very predictable. Not only does our activity and the results of our activity, but the results start becoming very predictable. Okay? And there's evidence behind what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you're saying, right, that will allow you to understand why it's predictable. Okay? Now, is the approach scalable? Okay? When we started frontline selling, again, 12 years ago, as an appointment setting business, right, because of the predictability of our approach, we knew that it would be scalable so long as we could maintain and define a discipline behind the activity. Right? So start looking at your teams, thinking about your teams, right? The team that you work on or the team that you're responsible for managing. Okay? And is it scalable? Is what they're doing currently, their activity, their process behind their prospecting activity, is that scalable? Okay? Now, from a management perspective and scalability perspective, it has to be measurable. Okay? So can you easily measure the results of that activity? Okay? Can you repeat this? Can this become a methodology, a process that if you say something, you know to get that response, therefore becoming predictable, and therefore you know that if it is predictable, you can scale that. Okay? But can you repeat this? Okay? Think about, again, your team's activity. Is what they're doing measurable and repeatable each and every time? Okay? And as your team either grows or you have attrition in your team, right, or you grow or you maintain your team, is your prospecting approach easy to teach and coach ongoing? Okay? Because, of course, as any athlete, professional athlete will tell you, right, ongoing coaching and mentoring is mandatory, as it is with any sales professional. So, you know, the fundamentals behind what to say and how to say it and when to say it and how many times to say it and exactly how to say it needs to be coachable. Okay? And then ultimately, is it effective? Is your activity effective? Okay? The bottom line is, are you seeing results that are increased from your current activity levels? Okay? The number of prospects that you're communicating with. Okay? How many of those individuals are actually responding favorably, and ultimately, how many more first meaningful business conversations are you engaging in more than you are currently today? Right? So when you fully optimize your prospecting activity, and of course, as I said, it has to be predictable, it has to be scalable, it has to be measurable, it has to be repeatable, it has to be coachable, and it has to be effective. Okay? So where do you begin? Right? The first three most important questions to ask in the first most three important areas to target is your current process predictable? Do you know and can you predict the results based on the activity that your team or yourself are engaging in? If you put forth X amount of activity, meaning number of prospects, number of touch points to each prospect, can you predict how many first appointments you can generate? Okay. Second is your current process, if there is a process, is it teachable? Right? Can you hire somebody on Monday, a new resource, a new employee on Monday, and effectively have them on the phones productively making prospecting calls by Wednesday of that same week? okay? And therefore, can you teach this? Can you make it easy enough for them to understand, comprehend, and actually engage in it successfully? Being teachable. And then, of course, is it repeatable? Can you do this over and over and over, knowing what the results will be? Can you scale that process? Okay. So again, as I ask you today, just to understand and start analyzing your own prospecting activity, okay, and the results and the conversions of your marketing efforts and marketing leads converting into qualified first conversations. Start looking at and start analyzing what is your process if you have a process. Again, most of the time we have these conversations when we start uncovering with our clients or prospects here at Frontline, there is no process. Typically, they don't have a defined methodology, okay? And as a result, their activity isn't predictable. So, you know, most oftentimes we hear, well, you know, the predictability is if we just make more calls, then we'll get more appointments. Okay. But then if that's the approach you're taking, is that truly scalable? Are you effectively maximizing and optimizing the prospecting activity, the amount of time that you're spending and putting forward and the effort that you're putting forth, is that actually optimized and fully effective? Okay. A lot of the times we realize once we start having these conversations that you know, the process isn't defined. Okay. So, you know, your thoughts, your feedback are certainly welcome. I want to be mindful and keep an eye on the clock for everybody's time this afternoon. What we've got, and what I'd like to do is to open up the forum to some questions and answers to understand and hear, you know, your thoughts and hear what you think about prospecting optimization. And if you have any questions, what I'll ask you to do is in the webinar, lower portion, there's a chat section. And what you're able to do is fill out a question. And what I'll ask Brooke to do is to, you know, take, you know, a number of the questions that are being asked so that we can open them up for discussion. So with that, Brooke, if you are able to.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Actually, we do have a few questions. Tom, you mentioned predictable. It seems this would be a complicated process to predict. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good question. A lot of the times, you know, our prospects and people that we speak to don't exactly know what to predict, right? and how to start quantifying the results. Well, again, what we know is we know that if we say something in a certain manner to a certain size audience, then the response rates will become very predictable. And that gets down to the level of exactly what to say and who you're saying it to. So for example, there are certain scripts that we'll provide, and we will help our clients, you know, define what to say in each individual prospecting scenario. We look at what can actually happen when you pick up the phone and dial someone's phone number. And if you think about, you know, the scenarios or the eventualities that you can find yourself in, there are actually not very many scenarios that you can find yourself in. Well, if you think about it, you know, you dial someone's number, you may get their voicemail, and that's frankly what happens most oftentimes. So, you know, there's a right way and a wrong way, you know, for everything. We believe we understand that we know the right voicemail to leave, which will drive the most predictable response rate. And this is something, of course, that we've studied and practiced and validated over the course of the past 12 years. So the predictability behind how people will respond to certain to certain words, to certain questions that we ask them. And then as long as we continue the activity, certain activity metrics, then the responses from the people that were the prospects that we're reaching out to starts to become very predictable. So in fact, as just in general terms, we expect as we reach out to our target audience, we expect and we predict that we will penetrate and we will ultimately successfully schedule a first meaningful business conversation with anywhere from 30 to 33% of the targeted audience that we reach out to and we pursue. So with those as the metrics and the kind of the barometer of our expectations, then the results of our activity, like I said, should become very predictable. And if we're not within those, within that 30 to 33% response rate and success rate, I should say, then we start looking at, on a more granular level, exactly, the nuts and bolts of our activity, exactly what we're saying and how many times we're saying it, and are we saying it correctly, so on and so forth.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. We have some really great questions coming in, so folks continue to send those over to us. The next question, Tom, if I'm a new seller, what might be an example of an effective voicemail to leave if I'm trying to set up a cold call?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. It's always one of the first questions we get is, what is the best voicemail to leave? And I'm sure that we've all, myself included, we've all tried to play around with and come up with various different voicemails that will get people's attention. Some are, maybe a little bit more devious than others. What we've found is, well, a couple things. Number one, consistency is the most important ingredient to getting a person's attention. And if you really think about it, prospecting is really nothing more than getting a person's attention. We're reaching out to individuals who most likely didn't wake up this morning thinking about you or your product or your solution or your company. So what we need to do is we need to, first and foremost, we need to get their attention. And what we know is that consistency and repetition behind a specific message is what helps drive familiarity faster. So from a voicemail perspective, first and foremost, make sure your voicemail is consistent every single time, every single voicemail you leave. Okay? The message should be identical, similar to the example we always use is McDonald's. Okay, McDonald's little marketing jingle, da 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 da, I'm loving it, never changes. It's always, I'm loving it, whether you hear it on the radio, see it on TV, read it in print, right? Pass it on a billboard, it's always the same message. So the voicemail message that you're leaving should be succinct. First, it should identify who you are. Second, you should state very clearly what your purpose is. And your purpose is to schedule a meeting or a conversation with that individual. Third is to give them specific times and dates. Give them two options of a specific time and date that you're requesting. Okay. Third, of course, is to provide your contact information. Okay. Fourth is to repeat your contact information. So from the way a typical voicemail would sound, I'll give you an example of my standard voicemail. Hello, this is Thomas Ryder calling from Frontline Selling. The purpose of my call is to schedule 20 or 30 minutes with you either next Tuesday or Wednesday at 10 or 11 o'clock a.m. to discuss helping your sales team schedule and engage in more meaningful business conversations to identify more business opportunities. Please let me know, again, if either next Tuesday or Wednesday is best for you. My phone number is 617-448-9055. Again, it's Thomas Ryder with Frontline Selling, 617-448-9055. Thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking with you. That message states what your purpose is, states your request clearly, and then provides information for that person to respond to you. Right? as well as gives the value proposition of what the topic of the conversation and what the value behind what you want to speak to them is about. Okay, the value proposition for frontline selling and the value of what we want to speak about is helping you create more meaningful first business conversations so that you can sell more. Okay, there has to be value behind why you want to speak with that person inserted into your message. Okay, each voicemail should be no longer than 20 to 23 seconds long. Okay, if you have further questions on that, of course, we'd be happy to address them with you directly offline.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Questions are still coming in, so let's just see how many we can tackle in the next several minutes here. Tom, one person asked, how do you qualify prospects?
How to qualify prospects is the question. How do we qualify a prospect?
Yes.
Okay. There are a couple of ways to qualify, and there are a couple of different, if you will, phases of qualification. The first phase of qualification is going to come, it's going to happen through the messaging that you're delivering. Okay. The process that you want to take and the consistency behind delivering your message is ultimately what we're doing is we're allowing these prospects that we're reaching out to make a more well-informed decision with the information we provide them on their own time. Okay. Our approach is not necessarily to try and catch somebody live at the moment in time we dial their phone number. Because, again, we go back to how scalable is your approach. And people say, well, again, if we want to increase our production, then we just have to make more calls. So, but realistically, right, if you're making 100 dials a day, right, then statistically we know 6 or 7 people will actually pick up their phone if we dial the phone 100 times. Okay, we studied this very intently over the past 12 years. Less than 7% of the time, somebody will pick up the phone when you dial their number. Okay, so the qualification is going to happen through the information we're providing and the message we're delivering. If they are not interested in, for example, scheduling more first meaningful conversations, they're likely not to respond. Okay, so that's the first level of qualification. The second level of qualification is going to come when you actually engage in a meaningful business conversation. So in order to fully qualify a prospect, and this is another kind of catch-22 that people that we speak to find themselves in is, well, we need to have more conversations. We need to qualify these opportunities better, but the problem is we're just not engaging in enough first qualifying conversations. Okay, so we go back to, well, let's look at what your prospecting process is, and is it fully optimized so that you are increasing the total number of first conversations you're having, and as a result, in those first conversations, you're able to qualify or disqualify more opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Next question kind of falls in line with still reaching out to your prospects. It says, what about calling into markets in other countries who might not have voicemail?
Good question. So, we often do here at Frontline for our clients call into, international, prospects, whether they be across the globe. There are some differences culturally. There are some times where a prospect may or may not have voicemail that they either have set up or use. And this is, again, this kind of goes back to our philosophy that we subscribe to, which frankly is not a new philosophy. It's based on a multi-touch marketing approach. We know that if we can touch an individual prospect a number of different ways, a number of different times. So for example, again, this is the age of communication, 2014. There are more than just one way. There's more than just one way to communicate with everybody, okay? So if they don't have a voicemail, there are still multiple other ways that we can effectively communicate our message and get our message in front of that prospect, okay? So just start thinking about what are the other ways in which you can deliver your message even if they don't have voicemail. Well, they may have a personal assistant, and oftentimes they do. An executive oftentimes will have a personal assistant that we can deliver our message through. At this point in time, I would say that everybody has email, okay? So there are ways in which to get permission to send an email so that we can get that message in front of them via email, okay? There are other individuals within the organization that can help communicate our message on our behalf. So even if, to answer the question, even if there is no voicemail, there are always other ways, multiple other ways, that you can communicate to every single person on this planet, you know, being, like I said, the year 2014.
Awesome. We have seriously, Tom, we have so many great questions. Trying to just kind of pick the ones that will be able to benefit the most. And okay, so next question. Can you speak to social media and best practices around balancing time between traditional practices?
Yeah, that's a great question, and of course, social media is, you know, so critically important, you know, nowadays. Again, time management is always going to be something that, you know, we all have to pay attention to. We all have to make sure that we are allocating the proper amount of time, right? Which leads back to, if your prospecting process is not fully optimized, then that just results in wasted time. So the balance between what your activity is that's why, you know, it's so important that your activity has to be optimized. You have to know exactly what your objectives are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what you need to accomplish in the time that you have allocated for prospecting. So, for example, we look at certain metrics that matter, is what we call them here at Frontline, and, you know, activity metrics in terms of if we're allocating X amount of hours each day, or X amount of hours every other day, or X amount of hours every 3 days, then we need to know exactly what and how much activity to put forth. Now, the activity that we pay attention to and the metrics that matter to us are not necessarily the number of dials we make. Okay? That goes back to, like I was mentioning earlier, that goes back to the inefficiency of just making more calls to try and get more meetings. Okay? That approach is not scalable. The metrics that we look at and the way we're able to manage our time so effectively here at Frontline, following our process, is because we're looking at things like, and we're measuring things like, how many individual prospects did I communicate? Not did I call, that I dialed, but did I communicate with? Okay? For each individual prospect, how many individual touch points or messages did I leave for that specific prospect each time I reach out to him or her? So, for example, if I were to reach out to a prospect today, right, my objective, my intention is to touch that individual as many different ways and leave as many different messages for that person today as possible. So I'm likely to get their voicemail, so I'll leave them a voicemail. If they have an administrative assistant, then I'll speak with or leave a message with that administrative assistant. Okay? Chances are they probably have an email, so I'm going to work diligently to get permission to send them an email. So in that attempt, I'm touching that individual prospect 3 times. So these are the metrics that matter to us. These are the activity measurements that we know if we touch an audience in that certain synchronicity consistently, then our results will become very predictable. And as a result, the time that we're allocating becomes much more effective, much more optimized.
Wonderful. So I know we're starting to get low on time here, and let's take one more question, and then for everyone who's asked, if we weren't able to get to your question, we will actually connect with you following today's session and provide that answer one-on-one. There really have been some genuinely great questions, so we do want to touch base with you on that. Last question, Tom. From a business intelligence sales perspective in the SMB market, who should you be targeting as a potential prospect? CEO, CFO, VP, so it kind of goes through the levels.
Yeah, excellent, excellent question. And of course, the answer, pardon me, is certainly going to vary depending on the specific solution set that you are, that you're pursuing or that you're selling in each case. However, the overall general answer to the question of who you should be pursuing is all of the above. Okay, you should start by calling and pursuing in every single company that you call, regardless of ultimately who it is you want to speak with. Every single company you call into, the first call that should be made is to the president or CEO's office. And we do this and we follow this process for very specific reasons. Number one, not only would it be beneficial, right, to have a conversation with the CEO or the president, however unlikely, okay? Although it's unlikely that they will schedule an actual meeting with the president or CEO, it is very likely that if we let them know what it is we want to speak to them about, they will point us and direct us to the most appropriate individual to speak with. And as a result, what we're able to do is, number one, generate a referral for ourselves, so that when we do pursue the individual that they have steered us towards and pointed us towards, we can then say, we've been pointed in your direction from the CEO's office, who suggested we set some time to speak. Okay, so it increases the urgency, number one, by generating that referral for ourselves. Number two, what we're actually enabling those individuals that we're contacting along the way to do is to socialize our message on our behalf. So for example, when and if we call into a CEO's office, it's more likely that we're going to engage in a conversation with the administrative assistant. And if we're able to get, say, for example, an email to the administrative assistant of the CEO, then what we're able to do is enable them to forward our message on our behalf to the individual that they feel is most appropriate. So again, not only are we identifying and confirming and validating who it is ultimately we should be speaking with, we're also enabling each individual along the way to socialize and communicate our message on our behalf.
Wonderful. Thank you. Awesome answer.
Excellent, excellent questions. And like Brooke said, we want to make sure that, and we certainly will make sure that we address each and every one of you who have, put a question in there. We'll make sure that offline we reach out to you, and we'll get answers to each one of your questions following today's session. Unfortunately, we just, we certainly don't have the time to address each and every one of them, as there are so many. So that's really good. Thank you for those. Okay, and again, as we start wrapping up today's session, I want to thank you all for taking the time and having the interest in really taking a look at, like I said, hopefully now taking a look at and starting to really analyze your own individual prospecting processes, understanding what your people are doing, the time that they're spending, is it maximized, is it the most efficient use of their time, and are they maximizing the results? And the net results are obviously increasing the overall number of first qualified business conversations that you're having with prospects who are genuinely interested in wanting to speak with you. So I want to thank you all for your time. Certainly want to, extend the invitation to each and every one of you. If you have any questions, if you want to open up, certain discussion points, if you want to, want us to provide any feedback to your own processes, we would be more than happy to have those conversations. This is, certainly what, what our expertise is. This is what we do every day. We do it for our clients, and we show our clients how to do what we do. So with that, my contact information, direct contact information, is here below. You've got me on on Twitter as well as on Facebook, and we can certainly connect. Like I said, this being the age of communication, 2014, more ways than one just to contact me. So I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you all very much for your time and your attention. Have a great afternoon.